So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Fallout. So let's start the series. When he opened his blue eyes, he saw the frosty edges of a glass window. His body felt frozen and numb. The window gradually thawed, revealing blue pods arranged side by side on a metal platform, each holding a person in a Vault Tech jumpsuit. The pod door slowly opened, allowing warm air to slowly warm his frozen body. His blonde hair was now dripping wet and completely unfrozen, and he shook his head to try to shake off the dizziness he was experiencing when the door rose up and fully opened. He slowly stood up and arched his back once he was at full height, sighing with satisfaction as his muscles stretched and his bones popped. "Ah, that's right, we are in Vault 001, but why are we in pods? What happened?" he thought as he looked down to see his Vault Tech 001 jumpsuit completely dry by some miracle. He was startled out of his reverie by a cough to his left, and his eyes widened when he noticed that the metal hallway he was in had at least 100 of the blue pods on either side. Slowly, people were leaving the pods in the same manner that he had. He went slowly up to an old man on his left who appeared to be doing well except for dry coughing on his knees. "You okay there, old-timer?" he rasped. "You seem to have a dry throat from being frozen." He took the man by the arm and helped him stand up, running a hand through his sleeked-back gray hair. "I'm not old, you punk, I'm 45 and still able to kick your ass," he complained. The man rose up and said, "Wow, I'm sorry, I just wanted to lend a helping hand," raising his hands. The blonde took a step back. The man went on to complain, "Ah, you're a good kid. Sorry to be snippy with you, the name's Richard and you are." The blonde searched his back pocket for his Vault ID card, took it out, and showed it to the man. "My name is Naruto, and I'm glad to meet you." They nodded and shook hands right away. "I don't know what happened and I don't know why we got frozen, but everyone looks a bit skittish. You would think the people at Vault Tech would be here to help us. I mean, the overseer should at least be here to greet us," Naruto said, observing that everyone was now completely awake and conversing with one another. Some people appeared scared, confused, and like they were about to lose it. Richard was correct when he said, "I don't know Richard, but if someone doesn't give us an explanation soon there is going to be a riot." As soon as Naruto finished speaking, they heard some banging coming from down the corridor. "Get the fuck off of me, I gotta get out of here." Two guys were battling on the floor when they glanced at it. One man was on top of the other, pinning him to the ground and saying, "Calm down, man. It's going to be all right. Vault Tech will come help us." The man at the bottom appeared upset and fought against the man's hold. "It seems we are on our own, Naruto, everyone is getting scared, and I think shit's gonna hit the fan." Richard and Naruto looked around, and people started to become restless as it seemed to sink in that Vault Tech assistance was not present and wouldn't be arriving anytime soon. Naruto sprinted down the hall, squeezing past people on his way to what appeared to be the hall's entrance. He climbed the 3 metals grid stairs to get a better look at the now irate crowd of Vault residents. "Vault Tech should have been here by now. What we gonna do? Get away from me, bitch. We're all gonna die in dash. Bang!" "What was I thinking? Everyone is looking at me," asked Naruto as he held a smoking 10mm pistol in the air. His breath was ragged, and he truly had just fired a gun in the air for the first time. All of the residents of Vault 001 stopped their frantic behavior and turned to face the source of the gunshot that shook the hallway. "I know you're scared and you have every right to be. I'm scared too. Vault Tech isn't showing up, so it looks like we are on our own," he said, looking around the room as if he had everyone's attention. The crowd began to whisper to itself, and hushed words danced across the room. Why did we get frozen? What do we do now? Yeah. Naruto raised his hands to calm the crowd. I don't know why we were frozen. Maybe it was to keep us safe during the bomb strikes, I don't know, but what I do know is, we gotta work together. Vault Tech abandoned us, but we can't abandon each other. We gotta work together to keep the human race going, because for all we know, we could be the last survivors. Each one of you have a Vault Dweller ID. On it is your housing information and job status. I suggest you go to your rooms and get ready for tomorrow, because tomorrow is a new day, was the statement that seemed to have struck a chord with many of the people. Could they really be the last of humanity? They asked themselves, and they realized what they had to do. Come, our new lives are ahead, we need to stick together and survive. You guys with me? Naruto said as he approached the double slide doors and pressed the red button on the side. They opened with a hiss, allowing people to explore the vault. Others looked around them, and some nodded in agreement, while others even whispered, "Yeah." I said, "Are you with me?" Naruto responded, shaking his head. "Yeah." Are we gonna die down here? No. Are we gonna survive? Yeah. Then let's go. As each person entered the actual vault of Vault 001, Naruto waited by the door and observed them all, giving him their own token of gratitude. Some nodded in recognition, while others smiled weakly. One family of 4 even shook his hand and expressed their gratitude. When all of the dwellers had gone into the vault, he was ready to go in himself when Richard grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. "Gotta say I'm a little impressed, kid," Richard said with a small smile, and he told Naruto to follow him. They could hear the hissing of sliding doors and lively conversation as they made their way through the vault's hallways. The older man halted in front of the medical ward window and turned to Naruto, asking, "Where are you taking me, Richard?" "Before the bombs hit, I was promoted to commander of the 25th Company of the U.S. Army, and I was charged with this vault's security and defense," Naruto said, looking at the man bewildered. "That's nice, man, but why are you telling me?" "Before we entered the vault and got escorted to the cryopods, I, along with a couple others like the head of medical, engineering, science, and so on, got a tour of the vault," Richard said, continuing his walk and motioning Naruto to follow. They had just passed the dining hall when they began climbing a flight of stairs, reaching floor 4, which was named Controls and Overseer's Office. Richard continued walking until he came to a door marked Overseer. "Wait, so you're saying there is an overseer, or at least there was one?" Naruto halted. "During the tour we not only saw the vault's interior but also met some personnel, some science guys from Vault Tech, some government officials, and the overseer. A half-circle desk with a terminal in the center, a regular desk with a printer and filing cabinet in the far corner, and a round window on the left wall that looked out over the 3 levels of the residence housing were all visible when Richard entered a code on a panel next to the door. Before he entered, he motioned for Naruto to go in first, saying, "Yes, but it seems he up and left with Vault Tech. Listen, kid, these people are scared, and to be honest so am I. We need to get things up and running here, get this vault up and ready for us to survive," said the older man as he approached the window and gazed at the residents entering their rooms and walking along rails. Naruto approached the man and looked out the window with him. "You're right, Richard, I imagine you're the guy that's going to run this place, being the commander and all." Richard laughed and shook his head, saying, "No, I'm a soldier, not a president. I just give orders and commands. This vault needs someone who can inspire and motivate people. They need someone intelligent." Naruto nodded and turned to face the ground. "Yeah, you're right, but who is that?" he asked. "You," Richard's straightforward response was, "Listen kid, you stood up in front of 200 angry people and not only calmed them down but also inspired them. You made them think of the future and our responsibility to keep the human race going." Naruto stepped back and shook his head, saying, "Nah Richard, you're crazy, I ain't a leader, why would you even think that?" Richard then moved forward and took the younger man by the shoulders. Richard shook his gray head, saying, "Damn kid, you got this, you seem smart, you even knew how to get people settled in their rooms and if they got jobs or not, no one could have thought of that." Naruto scowled as he stared out the window. "Damn man, I don't know, me being in charge of all these people. Well, all I did was read the Vault Dweller Guide, and all the information is there." Naruto smiled. "Regardless, you got my support kid, or should I say Mr. Overseer sir," was Naruto's bashful response, which made Richard sigh. Richard waited patiently for his response, watching as the yellow head moved slowly over to the desk and sat in the blue overseer's chair. "Fine, I will be the overseer." He walked to the front of the desk and stood to attention, asking, "What will your first order of overseer be then, sir?" Naruto looked up at the man in amazement, as he had gone from being a laid-back guy to the military commander of the U.S. government and now to the vault. Richard felt a little better now, things were getting a little better, people were less angry, and they had an overseer now, so this could work. Naruto replied immediately, "First order of business Commander Richard is to gather some men and women and equip them with the means to not only guard the vault from outside threats but keep the peace within the vault. Get a list of people who want to become part of the guard." As the door closed, he turned to his terminal and pressed the power button to turn it on. The green screen lit up and in the center it said, "Enter password." Naruto became anxious, wondering how he could get into the main terminal now. He looked around the room frantically, but his heart calmed when he saw the password stuck to the top right corner of the terminal. Richard grinned, "Anything else, sir?" Naruto nodded, "Yes, get all the head of departments in my office as soon as possible, that will be all." Richard saluted, and marched out of his office. After removing it from the screen and entering it into the terminal, he shook his head and laughed, saying, "Cola. Such a simple password for a very important computer," he said. The screen then changed to a menu section, and he pressed the Tasks section, which opened a list of tasks for the Vault Dwellers. Give Dwellers a Pip-Boy was the option he chose. The storage list revealed that they had hundreds of the items. "These are the head of departments you asked to see, sir," he said, looking up from his writing as a group of people entered his office. They all lined up in front of him, with Richard standing to his left. He had taken a pen and paper from the desk drawer and had written down what he needed to do tomorrow. After giving Richard a brief nod of gratitude, Naruto turned to face the four individuals in front of him. A black woman with average height stood to the far right, her skin paler than her hair, and she held a hand on her hip. Naruto glanced at the folder stack Richard had set in front of him, located a folder containing the woman's photo, and read her profile. "I take it you're Dr. Elizabeth Rachel, you studied at Stanford Medical School and finished top of your class. Also did 2 years work at UCLA Medical Center, impressive. It says on your folder you will be head of medical and the chemistry lab. It's a pleasure to meet the new overseer, I will do my best," said the woman, now known as Elizabeth, laughing. He turned to her left and saw a white, portly, bald man wearing a red cap. Where he got the name was anyone's guess, but Naruto looked down at the folder and was right. "Name's Philip Myers, sir," should say right there in that folder that I'm head of botany and livestock. "Seems you are Philip, says you're the owner of Nevada's biggest dairy farm, pleased to meet you," Naruto said, looking down at the folder. You must be Mark Garcia. Wow, says you cooked for the U.S. Navy for 2 years, then served as a sous chef for the state president of California, said a short Mexican man with black curly hair and a pencil mustache on Philip's left. Mark held his head up high and appeared to enjoy the look of amazement on Naruto's face. The man appeared to be pleased with himself, if his crooked smile was any indication. Naruto grinned and glanced at the next folder, saying, "That's right, sir. I hope I can prove to be an excellent head of food and storage." "I'm sure you will, Mark. Thank you." Finally, Naruto spoke to the final group member, a slender elderly man with ebony skin and gray balding hair on the back and sides of his head. He was a foot taller than Philip. "It's a pleasure," he said, pushing his thick black glasses up his nose and clearing his throat. The man appeared to be evaluating him, looking over him as though he was making a choice. Naruto glanced at his folder on the man and said, "It's a pleasure for me, Dr. Christopher, to see that you have a master's degree in biology, a PhD in engineering from MIT, and a PhD in physics from Caltech. It's safe to say that I'm impressed." "Thank you, sir," Naruto said, leaning back in his chair and clearing his throat. "I know you're all wondering why I called you here," he said, observing a nod from each of them. "Richard here has nominated me overseer of Vault 001, so it appears I am in charge, but I wish to get your thoughts and opinions. Do you think I should be overseer?" Philip was the first person to speak. "I can speak for everyone here when I say it was amazing what you did. We was all freaking out till you calmed us all down and motivated us to move forward. Am with you, son. I accept you as the overseer." After Philip finished, Elizabeth moved forward and said, "I agree. I mean, you took charge, and if Richard thinks you're the man for the job, I can't complain as long as I run the medical center my way." Naruto laughed and gave him a look that left no room for disagreement. "Of course, run it as you see fit. As long as everyone is healthy, I don't care," she said, smiling with satisfaction. "I really don't care who is in charge as long as I have a bed to sleep on and I get to do my job. I approve of you being overseer," Mark responded quickly. Naruto turned to see if Richard had heard him, but he simply shrugged his shoulders and said, "Very well then, thank you, Mark," as he said. "I just have one question for you before I make my decision whether or not I approve of you being overseer," said Naruto, looking the man in the eye before nodding quickly. "What are your plans for this vault and its people? What is the goal here?" asked Dr. Christopher, who was the last to voice his opinion, assuming that everyone was watching him. "I plan to maintain order and peace in this vault, to keep humanity alive and thriving for as long as I can, maybe one day, once it's safe, or if we are forced to reclaim the world we lost by going to the surface," Naruto said as he got up and moved to the window to look out over the vault's living quarters. From the dimmed lights, it appeared that everyone had gone to bed. "What say you then, Dr. Christopher? Will you help not only me but all of us rebuild humanity to what it once was?" he asked, turning to face them. Philip was grinning foolishly, Mark smirked slightly, and Richard nodded in agreement. Elizabeth appeared to give him a seductive smirk and a nod. He now stood in front of the elderly man, awaiting his response. The room was silent as everyone awaited the conclusion of Naruto's brief speech. "Very well, I will fully support you as overseer." Christopher's steely face finally smiled. He swiftly took Naruto's hand and shook it. Naruto broke the handshake, sat down at his desk, and turned to face the group. The man saluted and said, "Yes, sir," before heading off to complete the assignment. "Thank you all for the support, it will make things move easier, Richard." "You have your orders, gather those who are listed as military or guard and put them through training. He went to a supply box near the cabinet in the corner and took out 4 Mark 5200 Pip Boys for each of them. For the rest of you, work starts tomorrow. Everyone will be going to their assigned sectors of work. It will be down to you to set them tasks and make sure your sectors are operational. Here on each one of these is the data you will need. It contains your job descriptions and tasks needed to carry out for your sectors. They also give you access to areas others are not permitted to go to, he said, tossing them the Vault Tech device and watching them strap it to their wrists when they were finished. He went on, "Once again, thank you all. Read your profiles and get some sleep. We have a lot to do tomorrow. I was thinking of speaking to everyone in the dining hall and handing out Pip Boys, then I will send them off to your sectors where you will give them their jobs," since it appeared that they were all understanding what he had just said. Naruto glanced at the other 3 and they appeared to agree. "Very well, you may go." Christopher nodded in agreement, saying, "Yes, it's best that we head to the sectors first and make sure things are operational. We will be ready and waiting." He watched as they turned away from him and walked out of his office, his eyes lingering on Elizabeth's attractive backside until they were out of sight. After grabbing his own Pip Boy from the box by the cabinet, he went to his desk and sat on the overseer chair while strapping it on. After putting the Pip Boy on his wrist, he opened his desk drawer and discovered the holotape labeled Overseer. He plugged it into the bottom of his Pip Boy and waited to see what data it held. After turning off his alarm clock, Naruto slowly got out of bed, sat by his bedside, and rubbed his eyes to clear the sleep. With blurry vision, he checked the time and saw that it was Friday, May 11, 2277. He got up and walked slowly to the room's en suite bathroom, where he quickly brushed his teeth and did his personal hygiene before putting on his clothes. He wore a dusty leather jacket, a white shirt tucked into black jeans, and a dusty leather jacket. He left his room and entered his office. Although he preferred to sleep in the living quarters with the other residents, the department heads recommended that he sleep in the overseer's room, which was connected to the office. He hurried out of his office and descended the stairs into the living halls, passing by some of the residents to say hello and exchange brief words. A week had passed since he was named overseer, and everything had been going well. The day after his meeting with the department heads, everyone was assigned their Pip Boys and their jobs. It had been a rough start, to put it mildly. The vault was like a maze, with some rooms having no signs identifying them. He assigned Christopher the duty of creating a map of the vault. When he eventually arrived at the dining hall's entrance, he nodded to the 2 guards on either side of the door before entering. They were wearing black standard-issue combat armor over the jumpsuit, and they had the number 001 in yellow on the left side of their chest. He laughed when he recalled Tuesday, when Richard had first introduced him to the new recruits. Rewind. Richard, who was now wearing a standard drill sergeant's uniform and had a 10mm pistol strapped to his hip, was followed by Naruto through the metal hallways of the vault's lower level. His heavy black boots banged with every step, and he came to a door marked Training Hall. The training hall was exactly that. It had a smoothed-out wood floor and metal walls, was stocked with various obstacles and equipment, and was illuminated by white lights that hung from the roof. 2 groups of people were arranged in single file in front of them. They were all wearing green jumpsuits and appeared to be chatting among themselves when Richard came forward and called out, "Stand to attention, soldiers, overseer in the hall." His voice reverberated throughout the hall, causing the recruits to stand up, with their heads held high, their backs straight, and their arms raised. "Listen up, recruits, some of you were just out of school before the bombs dropped, and a lot of you are just your average workers and some of you are ex-military who won't do their part. To me, you're nothing more than clay ready to be molded into weapons of war. You are all going to be trained to the standard of a U.S. soldier. You will be put through physical and mental exercises and will begin firearms training when I believe you're fit to do so. Do you get me?" Richard began to pace up and down the lines, his arms folded behind his back, looking at the men and women in front of him. "We get you, sir." "It was nice to train recruits once more," Richard said with a smile. "Now a word from the overseer," he said, walking back to Naruto and standing to his left. Naruto turned to face the group of men and women of various ages who were waiting to train. Some of them appeared eager, some a little nervous, and why wouldn't they be, and some even scared. He cleared his throat before continuing, "First of all, I want to thank you all for signing up and taking on the task of being a member of this vault's military. Not only are you tasked with defending this vault from external threats, but also to keep order and peace within it. I ask you to do your best and learn well from Commander Richards. Lieutenant Miller, get these recruits running the obstacle course this instant," he said, grinning as he concluded his speech. "Sir, yes, sir. Come on, recruits, line up at the course and get a move on. Let's go," he said, nodding at Richard, who then moved forward and turned to face a blond man at the end of the first row. "I love training new recruits. Wonder if they can take my training," Richard said, turning to Naruto. Naruto shook his head and smiled with the elderly commander. "So how many do we have in total?" Richard asked. "We have 47 people to enlist," Richard said, placing his hands on his hips. "Most of them are just out of high school or college, but some of them have military experience like Lieutenant Miller, but nothing fancy." Richard's laughter cut through Naruto's thoughts as they ran their course. "It's not enough. Who knows how many men Vault Tech will send once they decide to come back." "Don't you worry, sir. We might not have the manpower, but we certainly have the firepower. Follow me," Richard said. "This is crazy. I can't even begin to imagine what other weapons are in here," he said to Richard, who was grinning foolishly, as he walked past him and showed the excited blonde the terminal hanging next to the door. He tapped on the section called Storage Log, stepped back, and pointed at the screen. Naruto walked to the other end of the hall to a door labeled Armory, and his eyes widened at the sight before him. Shelves and tables full of weapons and ammunition filled the room. He went to the nearest table and grabbed the first gun he found, grunting while pointing it at a wall. They possessed a wide range of weapons, including pistols, .56 assault rifles, plasma weapons, laser weapons, and even heavier weapons like Gatling lasers, missile launchers, and micro-guns. "As you can see, sir, we have enough munitions to fight another war," Naruto said as he swiftly looked over the weapons list. He turned to face Richard, but he was no longer behind him. He heard boxes moving in the back of the room and turned to see Richard moving a stack of plastic boxes. "This is unreal, Richard. You were right. We got enough weapons to last us a very long time. Says here we even got some combat armor and stealth equipment," he said. "What are you doing over there, Richard?" He approached the corner of the room where Richard was standing and turned on his Pip-Boy's light after realizing it was darker there. He looked up from his Pip-Boy to see a door concealed behind the boxes Richard had moved. The older man opened the door, and it was so dark inside that you couldn't see it if you put your hand in front of your face. Both of them intervened, with Naruto's Pip-Boy doing little to illuminate the room. "What are we doing in here, Richard?" he asked, hearing Richard take a few steps to the left before stopping. "Just wait and see, sir, you're going to love this," he said, hearing a click before the light above him flickered on. Gradually, each light on the roof illuminated a different area of the room, revealing what it held. Naruto's eyes widened as each light came on. The hallway in front of them was long and wide, with a row of power armor stations on each side. Each station had a suit of power armor on it that was ready for use. Naruto shook his head and walked toward the closest station, looking at the armor that loomed over him. "It's the X-01 Mark V power armor, sir, best suit the military ever produced, very pricey but well worth the money," he said. He recalled reading the experiment profile on his terminal, which said, "Experiment approved by President E." His eyes glowed red at the idea of this president, who undoubtedly had ambitious ambitions involving this vault. Richard quickly responded, 375 suits of armor do we have here?" "Some assembled, some will need to be built," Naruto said, nodding in satisfaction. "Of course, sir," the elderly man said, "during my time in the service before making commander I was captain of a heavy support squad, each member having a full suit of power armor." Naruto smiled maniacally. It was obvious that these suits were hidden for this President E. Now that they were in the vaults, they would be used to protect its citizens. When the commander heard the serious request, he saluted and said, "Sir, yes, sir, when they are ready they will be given their training." Naruto left the room, and Richard trailed closely behind him. "I will have Christopher put a team of engineers together to start building and maintaining the suits soon as possible. Just get these men ready, Richard." He turned back to see Richard nod before rushing to perform his duties. End of the flashback. After getting his breakfast from the serving line, he finally sat down, set his tray of eggs, soy bacon, and sausage on the table, and got to work. He was anxious because, although this vault was officially a military bunker with all of its weapons and armor, it felt like it had a different purpose as he looked into its rooms and living quarters. Yes, it had a dining hall, a mini soccer field, and living quarters. When Elizabeth sat next to him and bumped into his shoulder, he stopped thinking about his mysterious enemy. "Hey Mr. Overseer, what are you thinking about?" He smiled at the beauty's attitude, as she always seemed upbeat and prepared for the day. "Nothing much, just thinking about next week and how we are gonna slaughter the cows without them running through the vault." They both laughed quickly. "So being overseer has its downsides, huh? You look tired." He sighed and unconsciously rubbed his eyes, realizing that sleep wasn't easy these days. Before shoving scrambled eggs into his mouth, he said, "Yeah, just busy with work and running the place." Elizabeth would have replied, but a man wearing glasses and a white lab coat came to the table and said, "Sorry to bother you, Dr. Elizabeth, but someone down at engineering somehow cut 3 of his fingers off and no one is on call to put them back on." He appeared nervous as he made the request, so Elizabeth sighed and got to her feet. "Well, it looks like I am having breakfast in my office. See you around, Mr. Overseer," she said, winking at him before following her fellow doctor out of the dining hall. He hurriedly finished his meal and piled his empty food tray with the others to be cleaned. He then left the dining hall to begin his daily responsibilities, checking in on each department to make sure everything was operating smoothly. He would begin at the bottom of the vault to see how the recruits were doing with their daily training, where they were assigned shifts and tasks like watching over the common areas like the dining hall and living quarters. He then proceeded to the facilities floor, which housed the generators that powered the vault and the water purification rooms. He would then meet with Christopher in his office to provide him with reports on the amount of clean water produced and the amount of electricity generated and consumed. The farm, which they just called the farm because that's what it was above them. They had rooms with different crops growing under heat lamps and water spitters to help them grow. The farm hands would check on them to see if they were growing properly or if any harmful bacteria had gotten on them. The livestock rooms were enormous. There were 3 of them, and each one contained a different animal: cows, pigs, and chickens. The animals were fed the crops and given clean water in their pens, and Philip had the brilliant idea to use their waste as an agricultural fertilizer. In order to finish the day, he would meet Mark in the dining hall to check on food production. Mark would also share any gossip he heard while working and serving food, and today's gossip was about a man named Niall who apparently knew how to get stuff for the right price. He never checked in on the medical bay because he always felt in the way, so he left Elizabeth to her work as long as she sent him weekly reports. In order to wrap up the day, he would file all of his reports onto his terminal and create hard copies to put in his cabinet. He sighed, "Coffee time," when everything was finished, got out of his chair, and went into his private room. He quickly turned on the coffee maker, undressed while his coffee was being made, placed all of his clothes in the basket by his bathroom door, and changed into shorts for bed. Ding! He returned to the coffee maker and poured some into his white mug. After taking a quick sip, he checked his Pip-Boy and saw that it was 9:30. "That time already," he said. He quickly finished the coffee, brushed his teeth, and hopped into bed, appreciating the little sleep he was getting now because being an overseer was a demanding job. He closed his eyes and allowed his thoughts to wander in the hopes that it would help him fall asleep. "FEV has been injected, Dr. Now Dr. the patient he is waking up," he said as he opened his eyes to a blinding surgical light above him. "Get the gas and put him back under, we are not done," he said as he watched the assistant grab a mouthpiece attached to a tank. She tried to put it over his mouth, but he growled at her. His right hand quickly tore through his restraints and grabbed her hand. "Dr. He has lost control, he is going feral, get AGH, he said, breaking her arm with his firm grip. He pushed her away and leaped off the table after untying himself from the surgical bed. He ran frantically through metal hallways, stopping when he passed a window. He looked into the window to see his reflection, and as he walked closer, he noticed that he looked different. His eyes were red, his blonde hair had grown longer, and his canines were more noticeable. He looked down to see that he was wearing a Vault 001 jumpsuit, but it was unbuttoned down the middle. He buttoned it back up, and when he looked up in the glass, his appearance had returned to normal. "Hey you, what you doing over there?" The man sighed and walked over to Naruto, who turned to face the person who had just called him. "Never mind, I don't have time for this, come on, let's get you back to the group, your new life begins now, Vault Dweller," he said, as he looked into the eyes of the Vault Tech assistant who was waiting for an answer. The man led him to a hallway where he saw people in similar clothing putting on blue pods. "Don't worry, this is to check if you're medically fit to go into the vault, it won't hurt a bit," the man said as he led him into one of the pods. "Sir, please don't bang on the glass, sir, stay calm, sir, 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 open up, something has happened," the man said, but he knew what this was, and he started to bang on the now closed pod. "Sir, open the door, are you in there? Facilities has had a major issue, it's critical." Naruto jumped out of bed and ran to his door, where he saw Christopher with a panicked expression. "Dr. Christopher, what is it, what's wrong?" he asked, clutching his now throbbing head. Was that a dream? It felt so real, more like a memory. Since water is essential to their survival in the vault, Naruto became alarmed when the elderly scientist leaned against the wall and sighed before responding, "I don't know how and I don't know why, but facilities had a short circuit. The generators have been rebooted and are working fine, but the water facilities are seriously damaged." "Be straight with me, Dr. What's the situation?" he asked. "The way things are now, we can't produce clean water. All of the wastewater has been stopped. It isn't going through purification. It could taint the clean water we have," Christopher said, his expression turning gloomy as he met the blonde's gaze. "How long do we have before our clean water runs out?" Naruto asked, letting out a sigh and turning to face the ground. 2 weeks. "And that is," he whispered excitedly, "well, the damaged component in the purifier is rare and we have none in storage to replace it, but I have come up with a means to get this piece of tech." Christopher sharply responded, 2 weeks, what were they to do? Naruto, honestly at a loss, sighed and ran his fingers through his golden hair before saying, "If I may, sir, I believe I have come up with a solution." Christopher shoved his glasses up his nose and responded, "There are a number of places in Georgia where we can get this equipment. It's just a matter of finding it and installing it in the water purifier." Naruto nodded for the man to continue, saying, "Come on, Christopher, out with it." He did his best to be patient, but a serious matter like this needed to be handled quickly. "What are you suggesting, Christopher?" "Simple, we leave the vault," the man smiled. The tiny artificial soccer field was now covered in irate vault dwellers as Naruto swiftly navigated through the throng of people, causing a commotion in the middle of the living area. "What's going on? Why has the water turned off? Does it have to do with the explosion in facilities? They seem pretty pissed, what you gonna say?" Naruto sighed as he approached the front of the crowd, where a row of guards stood, ready to prevent anyone from reaching the small stage that Christopher's engineers had set up behind them. The guards, upon spotting him, created a small opening for him to pass through. Richard was waiting at the steps with a megaphone in his left hand. Richard nodded, saying, "I'm just going to be honest with them. If I lie and the truth comes out, we will be back to this." "Time to face the music, sir," said Naruto, who also nodded and accepted the commander's megaphone. He hurried up the stairs and started yelling, "Pay attention, all dwellers, please be silent and I will explain everything." The crowd stared at him with anxious expressions on their faces as he explained, "Last night facilities went through a malfunction, a lot of equipment was damaged and is now being fixed, however, the water purifier is missing a key component." He was unsure of how the angry and perplexed residents would react to the new information, but it had to be done. "This piece of equipment will take time to get and install. I have been told we have 2 weeks' worth of clean water, so we have to ration." "This isn't right, we can't ration water. How will we clean ourselves? How will we stay hydrated?" a random man protested, and some members of the crowd appeared to agree. Naruto quickly responded, "Listen to me, we are currently working on getting the tech to fix the purifier, but it takes time. Over these next couple days a group of men and women will be leaving the vault and risking their lives, facing whatever they may encounter on the surface head-on. They will fight for this vault. So while those brave people are out there fighting, you will be complaining about not being able to bathe." Some people looked down at that comment, realizing that their complaints paled in comparison to the challenges the expedition team would face. "The overseer is right, we gotta fight through this. I am sure all of us can survive without a bath for 2 weeks while those fine people get us the tech," said an ebony woman who had approached him from the crowd. As she said, "Thank you all, I know this isn't easy, but no one said living in a vault was easy, but we will survive. We are all survivors, and I am proud to be a part of this vault." Her fellow vault dwellers nodded in agreement and agreed to do their share. "Everyone get back to your duties, water will be rationed to your rooms by facilities. Commander Richards, I need 3 military personnel of your choosing ready for this mission. I want them fully equipped for this journey. Is that understood? Naruto said, walking down the stage toward Richard, who was standing behind the guards. The commander gave a quick salute, "Sir, yes sir," and the man marched off to follow orders. Naruto grabbed the closest guard and said, "I need you to find me all the department heads, bring them to my office as soon as possible." The young recruit gave a nervous salute and hurried off to complete his task. After running to his office and avoiding anyone he saw along the way, Naruto began writing down instructions for the department heads. When his door opened, he looked up from his pen and paper and saw that all of the heads had entered his office, with the recruit trailing behind them. He turned to face the group and noticed that Christopher was not with them. "Where is Dr. Christopher, recruit?" the young man asked nervously. "I searched the whole vault, sir. No one knows where he is." "Never mind, I will speak with him later. Back to your duties," Naruto said, nodding in frustration. He turned to Elizabeth and watched as the young man, who was about his age, saluted and marched out of his office. "Doctor, I need you to prepare a medical bag for this mission out the vault. We will need stimpaks, Radaway, pain meds, and anything else you think is required. Once you're done, bring it to the training hall." Naruto went to his desk, took out a piece of paper, and handed it to Mark. "That woman who spoke out in the crowd before, who was she?" she asked, nodding. "Phil, I need you to keep things running as usual. Facilities will be giving the farm a little extra water to keep livestock hydrated." The portly man nodded and walked out his office door. "Her name is Melanie. Why? I want you to find her and tell her that she is tasked with keeping the people calm. That paper has some info that may help in her task," Mark said as Naruto hurried out of his office. They were at the bottom of the living quarters and were ready to enter the stairwell down to the military wing when he turned to face Mark. "I need you to do that as well as feeding the people. I also have a secret task for you," he said before entering. "I need you to get more intelligence on this Nile who knows how to get anything for a price," Mark said gravely, looking at Naruto. "I don't like how that sounds, and from what I've seen, he is one of the recruits, and he has access to weapons. The last thing I want is civilians running around with guns," Mark said. Naruto sighed and shook his head, saying, "Because I am going on the mission, Mark." Mark could only agree, that didn't sound good. People were agitated, and if they had weapons, who knew what might happen? "All right, I will look into it." "Wait, why are you telling me all this? Why does Melanie have to calm the people down? Why can't you do it?" Naruto smiled at Mark and his concern, saying, "Listen, how can I ask people to go out there to fight and die if I am not willing to do the same? You asked me to lead this vault, so that's what I am going to do," in response to the Latino man shaking his head in protest. "Sir, that crazy, you can't leave. What if you die? Who will lead us?" Mark stood motionless as he watched Naruto descend the steps into the military section. His admiration for the younger guy increased tenfold, and he quickly got over his surprise and rushed to find Melanie. When Naruto finally arrived at the training hall, he went straight to the armory to get ready. He went to the power hall, as the recruits called it, where he saw one of Christopher's engineers working on his custom-made X-01 Mark V power armor. "Is she ready to walk, Mike?" he asked, looking up from the leg joint he was working on. "Yes, sir, she is a beauty. This will protect from everything out there, besides the ladies." He concluded his small joke with a wink and giggled. Naruto laughed with the man. He liked Mike. he was the head of the power armor engineers, but he was laid back and knew his stuff. After walking behind his massive armor and turning the valve to open it, he climbed in and waited for the chunk to indicate that it was closed and ready to go. He then turned to Mike and nodded his gratitude. The armor fit snugly and moved with ease. Quickly returning to the armory, he located his preferred weapon, took a tri-beam laser rifle from the wall, and proceeded to the ammunition case to retrieve some fusion cells. After strapping his weapon to his back and loading it, he emerged from the armory to discover Richard and Elizabeth standing in front of 3 recruits. He strode toward the group, his armor trembling beneath his feet. "Overseer in the hall," he yelled as he and the 3 recruits saluted. He stood beside Richard and gazed at the recruits, at ease soldiers. He glanced at the 3 people in front of him, each wearing their own X-01 power armor, with their helms at their sides held between their left arm and hip. "Richards, tell me about this squad." Richard pointed to the blond man on the far left with a plasma rifle and said, "This is Lieutenant Miller Walker, sir." He then pointed to the man next to him who had black hair slicked back and said, "This grease monkey is Private Blake Hernandez." After his introduction, the grease monkey smiled at them and kissed his Gatling laser. "And lastly, this is Catelyn Adams." He turned to see a blonde woman who saluted when her name was called and brought her rifle closer to her hip. The man appeared perplexed, but he responded, "Because I intend to go with the squad, sir." Naruto nodded and smiled. "Well, that answers your question, Commander. I won't just order my people to go out and fight, I will lead the charge as any leader would. May I ask, sir, why are you wearing your armor?" he asked, turning to face Richard and looking him up and down while observing him in his own armor. "In here you will find everything you need for your mission," he said, turning to Elizabeth, who was standing quietly with a doctor's bag. He took the bag from her hand and threw it to Blake, who quickly caught it and put it on the ground beside him. "Thanks, Doc, we will probably need it," he said. When the hall door opened, he was stopped. Everyone turned to see Christopher hurrying in and approaching the group. "Ah, Christopher, it's nice of you to finally join us," said Naruto. The man's expression briefly changed to one of his usual stoic expressions. "Forgive me, sir, but I was making preparation for your mission. During the meltdown in facilities I was mapping out the vault as you asked. Turns out there is another floor leading up from facilities. It contains equipment which I believe will be beneficial to your mission if you would all please follow me. Let's see what Christopher has to show us." "Elizabeth, return to your duties, move out squad," the blonde said, shrugging his shoulders as they watched in frustration as the man went without saying anything more. They all turned to Naruto to see what they should do. When they finally arrived at the facilities, Christopher led them to an empty hallway beyond the power generator rooms, saying, "I was here during the meltdown. When the generators blew, it made this elevator panel flash." They all followed Christopher through the vault, passing civilian residents wearing their armor with awe and wonder on their faces. They watched as he opened the elevator door to reveal a spacious, sturdy elevator that could accommodate everyone. They all stepped in, and Christopher pressed the single button to ascend. Naruto glanced at Richard, wondering why Christopher would call it the runway. "It only goes to 1 floor above facilities. Here I found equipment and resources that will greatly help the vault. I have labeled this location the runway." The elevator door dingled open, and their eyes widened at what they saw. When they stepped out of the elevator, Christopher led them to a circular table next to a set of control panels. When they pressed a button on the circular table, a holographic image of the helicopters appeared. They were surrounded by 9 enormous helicopters, lined up on what looked like a runway, and the room was so large that they couldn't even see the roof. The brown-haired woman approached Christopher and grinned at everyone. "I would suggest taking Velma with you when you go on your hunt for the tech," Christopher said, glancing at the control panel. "This vault contains 9 vertibirds, each functional and ready to fly. I had Velma assist me by filling them with fuel." Without intending to come across as cruel, Naruto shook his head and said, "That's a no-go, Christopher. It's too dangerous and she will slow us down." Christopher gave him a displeased look and said, "Really, and do you or anyone of your squad know what the piece of equipment looks like?" They all glanced at one another, and it turned out that none of them knew what they were searching for. Naruto, now feeling foolish, sighed and nodded his head. "Okay, Christopher, did you find a place where the tech might be? Velma looks like you're part of the squad." Christopher pressed more buttons, and the hologram on the table changed to a blue map with 3 yellow locations illuminated. The Vault Tech University of Nevada, the Trade School of Gas and Water, and finally Vault 09 are the 3 locations that should have at least one of the tech we are looking for, Naruto said, rubbing his chin and nodding. The 3 locations were quite distant, so he looked up at the people seated around the table, leaned forward, and cleared his throat. He turned to Commander Richards and asked, "Do you have any idea how to fly a vertibird?" Richard folded his arms and glanced at the locations on the holo map, saying, "I had a buddy who taught me the basics before I came down here. I can get us to these locations." "All right, listen up. Our objective is to secure the piece of tech that will fix the water purifier. Velma knows what it is, and military personnel like myself, Lieutenant Miller, Private Blake, and Catlin will be her personal guard and escort. Richard, take the squad to the bird and load up the equipment. I need a word with Christopher and Velma," Naruto said with a satisfied nod. "You heard him, squad, let's move out," the commander said. They watched as they marched to the closest vertibird. With a hint of venom, Naruto said, "Christopher, you need to talk to me before making disagreements about personal matters. You can't just sign Velma up to leave the vault." Christopher stayed composed and adjusted his glasses, saying, "Actually, sir, I asked for volunteers and Velma along with 3 others stepped forward. I chose her because she was the best of the 3. Naruto was taken aback when he turned to face Velma and saw her smiling and adjusting her own glasses. "It's true, sir, I want to do my part. I also want to see the world after being frozen for 200 years, he said. "Sorry for my outburst, things have been hard lately," Naruto said, smiling and shaking his head as he turned to face Christopher. He then reached behind him and produced a 10mm pistol, took Velma's hand and placed it in her open palm, saying, "Take this, I hope you won't need it, but just in case anything happens you will need it. I don't know how long this mission will take, Chris, but it has to be done. I am putting you in charge of the vault while I am away, don't let me down," the woman said, nodding and placing the gun on her hip beneath her leather coat. "Get to the squad, Velma, tell them I will be over in a minute." The woman gave a crooked salute and jigged over to the vertibird the squad was occupying. "All right, squad, this is Pilot Richard speaking. Make sure the side door on the left is closed, Blake, make sure your harness is on in that gunner seat." He climbed into the side of the bird and sat down on the far right by the gunner seat, which was now occupied by Blake. Blake was now sitting in front of the mounted Gatling laser clipped on his harness. "Ready to go, sir?" Naruto nodded and made sure everyone was prepared. "Commander Richards, take us down the runway on Platform 1. The vertibird began to move, the spinning fans thundering as it did so. Naruto touched the communication button on his helm to contact Christopher, and he said, "Chris, take us up will ya?" Christopher used the terminal to raise the platform into the air, and just as it was about to hit the roof, he flipped a switch, causing a small portion of the roof to open up. The squad became anxious as they approached the roof, and the platform came to a loud clunk. The squad turned around and was astounded by what they saw. They were on top of a mountain, the sky was a dark blue, the clouds were gray, and the radio towers surrounding them were rusted and broken. "Get this bird in the air, Richards," they said, leaving the ground and moving into the gray clouds. "Might as well get some rest everyone, it will take a while before we reach our first location," Naruto said, settling into his seat and turning to face his team. He closed his eyes and tried his best to block out the bumps and the sound of the bird's propellers. Richard's words were the last thing he heard before falling asleep. "Welcome to the Surface Squad." Naruto awoke with a jolt and turned to see Catelyn cleaning her 5.56mm rifle. He sighed as he recalled the events of the previous day. They had been traveling for 2 days, and yesterday they had searched every inch of the Vault-Tec University of Georgia, but they had found nothing. He could still recall the smell of ash and decay. The air wasn't as fresh as he remembered before the bombs hit. They had discovered bodies with rags for clothing, which covered their skinless flesh. Catelyn had to take off her helm to vomit at the sight. Blake yelled, "Hey, look at this." He and the rest of the crew peered over the edge of the vertibird and saw 2-headed deer with pink skin running through the dead trees. "Looks like the surface isn't as lifeless as we thought," Miller whispered. Velma frowned and said, "They look disguising." Blake laughed and combed through his black hair. "Ah, come on Velma, don't tell me you wouldn't at least try a double deer steak." Velma covered her mouth and gagged. "Shut up, you gun monkey." Naruto and his squad couldn't help but laugh at Blake's actions. "Sir, we are approaching the School of Gas and Water," he said, sighing and turning to face his squad. He admired such moments, but everything comes to an end. "All right, squad, we are approaching the next location, prepare yourselves for departure." Naruto grabbed his tri-beam laser rifle that was leaning against the wall and made sure it was loaded and ready to go. "Here we go, sir, we are nearly at ground level." Blake removed the Gatling laser from its stand and hopped off the vertibird. He hit the ground loudly and looked around the landing area. "All clear from what I can see, guys," Naruto said, touching the comms link on the side of his helm. "Okay, set her down, Commander." Miller was the first to exit the vertibird and join Blake, while Catelyn hopped off and assisted Velma in getting off the bird. The last to depart, Naruto strode over to Miller and asked, "What do we have?" "The building's pretty roughed up, but other than that it should be fine. The right side is nothing but rubble," Miller said, pointing to the massive courtyard and the partially collapsed building in front of them. They started to walk down the cobblestone path toward the center of the courtyard. "Velma, do you have any idea where our missing part might be in this building?" he asked. "It says here there is an advanced classroom with industry-sized equipment. It's in the basement level, room 012, Velma said, beginning to push and twist buttons on her Pip-Boy. "It says here on my maps there should be a stairwell dash," they said as they arrived at a dried-up water fountain and started to make their way to the broken double doors up the building's face. "Shit, it's an ambush, defensive positions, Catelyn, get Velma into cover," was shouted by someone in the distance as they grabbed Velma by the shoulder and pushed her behind the dry fountain. "Take this, you fuckers," said Naruto as gunfire began to pour down from the eastern rooftop and bullets began to ping from their armor. Everyone turned to look at Miller, who had somehow caught fire. They also heard a bottle smash and flames lit up next to Catelyn. Miller, you alright? Miller stoked the last of the flames on his arms and turned to face Naruto. Yes sir, just got a little warm but I am fine, Naruto said, looking at him and nodding quickly. The area exploded instantly, covered in smoke and dust, and then cleared to reveal blood and gore scattered among the smoking sandbags. They turned back to the building's entrance and saw people running out. Armed with a variety of homemade weapons, including chainsaws, bats, and even billiard cues, Naruto was able to identify these individuals for what they really were: savages. They had covered themselves with rubber tires, hide, and bone for armor, and they were covered in boils and scabs. Light these fuckers up, he said, and Miller and Blake stood beside him, each pointing their weapons in a line as he listened to the heavy gunfire. Their enemy had no chance and soon turned to ash, slime, and gore, so he popped his fuel cell and quickly replaced it with a new one. He could still hear Blake's Gatling laser hissing, and he heard a little cough and saw something move in the pile of flesh. As he approached, he saw a woman crawling toward a rusty sword. He prevented her from reaching the weapon by standing on her hand. Her cries, "Who are you? Why are you here?" drowned out the sound of her bones crushing beneath his armored foot. She looked up and growled at him, "Fuck you and fuck the Brotherhood," grunting through gritted teeth. Without even aiming, Naruto fired his laser rifle, creating a smelting hole in her head. "Fuck man, I killed her." Naruto was unable to move and could only stare at everything around him. Sir, are you okay?" he asked, jolting when someone touched his back. "Oh Catelyn, yes, I am good, just a little shaken up," he said, turning to see it was Catelyn. She nodded and turned to face Velma, who was looking around frantically, tears in her eyes as she entered data on her Pip-Boy. "Fuck man, cough, I didn't think it would be that bad," Miller said, shaking his head and sighing. "Alright everyone, listen up, what just happened was fucked up, no other way to put it. In the heat of everything we lost who we were and killed these people, but let's not forget why we are here. There are hundreds of people counting on us and the success of this mission, and these people got in the way of that mission. So hold your heads high and let's get this done, because I want to go home, back to our vault where we don't have to do this shit." Naruto could see that everyone was impacted by the current events, and how could they not? Naruto is right, fuck these guys, we did what we had to, let's get this shit over with, said Blake, putting his helm back on. He then grabbed his Gatling laser and took aim. Catelyn followed him up the stairs leading to the building's entrance, but just as she was about to do so, Velma halted and hugged Naruto. "Thank you, sir. I feel so much better after what you said, I was so scared." Naruto patted her on the back and put his metal arms around her, saying, "You don't have to be scared, Velma, me and the guys will always protect you." She looked up, grinned, and jogged after Catelyn. They finally made it through the broken doors of the school. The dark hallways were illuminated by fires coming from rusted trash cans, where to Velma looked up from her Pip-Boy to Blake and pointed down the left side of the corridor. "Down there, we should see some stairs leading down to the basement on the right." Blake began stomping towards the stairs that Velma pointed to, his eyes dancing across the odd shopping carts full of trash and burning wood. Miller at their back was aiming his plasma rifle down the opposite side of the hall covering their rear. They finally made it down the stairs and Velma spoke up. "Down the hall on the right should be room 012, water filtration 101. The group slowly headed to the classroom, all of them sending a silent prayer that the part they were looking for was in there. Blake stopped and gestured to Miller to take point going in. Miller put his hand on the door and looked behind him to see Catelyn at his back ready to follow. He slowly entered and looked left while Catelyn stepped in and looked right. Clear, was all Miller said before the group stepped fully into the room. As the last person to enter, Naruto sighed upon seeing the condition of the room. The chalkboard on the left side of the wall was covered in graffiti. Crude images of monsters and people fighting each other created a graphic image. Broken desks were stacked in one corner. The floor was covered in makeshift sleeping mats. Empty beer bottles and needles danced across the floor as they filed to the rear of the class. Funking junkies, hissed Blake as he, too, surveyed the room in disgust. This is an early model of the filtration system we have at the vault. These models were used on submarines, but the tech is all the same. It should have the component we need, Velma said as she hurried toward a giant machine in the back of the room. The squad was filled with hope after hearing those few words, and they watched with anticipation as Velma opened the machine and started looking through its mechanical organs. She smiled and took out what appeared to be a circuit board, which was roughly the size of a terminal screen, with a blue bulb in the right corner and a green body covered in silver and gold wires. Velma's smile vanished quickly, though, when she noticed a tiny hole in the middle of the board. "I apologize, sir, but this is the part that is useless," she said, dropping it to the ground and placing her hands behind her head in exasperation. Naruto and Blake walked to the opposite side of the machine, where he sighed in exasperation. A crudely drawn black and red target was on the flat side, covered in bullet holes, all of which appeared to have passed through the machine. Naruto watched as Blake kicked a chair in exasperation and heard him yell, "Fucking savages, man." Naruto rubbed the top of his helm and sighed, "Well, squad, it looks like we have one more stop to make before we get to go home." "Sorry, sir, I really thought we had found a good one," said Velma as they filed out of the room. "You don't have to be sorry, Velma, it's not your fault," Naruto said, grinning inside his helm and shaking his head. "If anywhere has that part, it's Vault 09, he said, as they hurried to the vertibird and started to settle in for their next stop. "Sir, what do you have to report?" Naruto lifted Velma into the side of the vertibird before pressing the side of his helm to reply to Richard. "Part found, Richard, but it's busted. Set coordinates for Vault 09, he said. Richard didn't reply. Instead, he simply turned on the vertibird's propellers and waited for Naruto to get in. Naruto grunted as he got into the vertibird and sat down next to Miller. He took off his helm and listened to it hiss as the pressure from his armor was released. He looked at the squad and scowled when he realized that the atmosphere was sour. The only sound they could hear was the low hum of the propellers outside the bird's hull. He rubbed his yellow hair before saying, "So, how's everyone's day going?" A feeble attempt to lighten the mood, he knew, but what else could he do? Blake shook his head from the gunner seat and laughed, "Oh, just fucking peachy, sir." He glanced at Catelyn and Velma, and both of them gave feeble smiles. "What about you, Miller?" Miller gave him a savage glare before turning to face his own hands. "I'm in no mood for idle talk." "Sir," Naruto said, placing his hand on Miller's back before turning to face the squad. "Look, I know this mission hasn't been easy, we haven't found the part yet, but I'm sure it's in Vault 09, Miller said, slapping his hand off his back and glaring at him angrily. "And what if it's not, what then? Are we going to wander the wastes forever in the hopes of returning to the vault? Are we destined to fight savages for the rest of our lives? You don't even sound the least bit concerned, making jokes at a time when our people's fate is at stake?" The group stared at Miller in disbelief because he was the best, most capable, most proud, and most obedient of all the recruits. Naruto then looked out of the open side of the vertibird and watched as a mixture of gray clouds and dead, naked trees blitzed past. I understand your fear, Miller, believe me, I do, but don't think for a second I am not worried about our people's future. I dread to think of us not finding the part we need for the vault. If we don't find the part, then we are doomed to resurface, but I have hope. I believe we can survive anything because we are survivors. If the parts are not at Vault 09, then so be it. I will kill 1,000 savages if necessary, if it means our people survived. Miller looked around to the group and could see them all relax at hearing Naruto's words. He looked back to Naruto and he could see the fire in his eyes as he looked out to the waste. Forgive me, sire, I spoke out of turn. You're right, it's just I worry for the future of us, for our people. So many depend on us. Naruto put both of his hands on his shoulders and smiled. I know, Miller, believe me, I know, I feel it too, but our people trust us to protect them, and that's what we will do. We will fight and keep fighting for our people, and I will make sure you don't look so fucking grim about it. Everyone including Miller chuckled at his final remark. Miller looked up at the smiling Naruto and nodded his head. Thank you, sir, I appreciate it. The group smiled at the moment between the two. It was after all a heartwarming moment. The moment broke, however, when they all heard Richard's voice play through the tannoy. Vault 09 is approaching. I will land just outside the main entrance. Get ready. Squad. Naruto placed Miller's plasma rifle in his arms and turned to grab his helmet. All right, squad. If any of you believe in God, start fucking praying the parts in this vault. Blake once again jumped off the bird and ran towards the vault's entrance, scanning the area for any threats. He could see the small hill that entombed the vault's entrance and could see the checkpoint stations before the vault door. He turned to see his squad mates climbing down from the vertibird and pointed to the hilltop. The crew trailed closely behind Naruto as they passed the second checkpoint, where they saw charred skeletons, makeshift weapons, and exploded cars everywhere. When they finally saw the massive vault door of Vault 09, they climbed the metal stairs leading to the door control panel and discovered more dead bodies on the ground. Looks like this vault was built under a small ridge, sir. Both checkpoints look abandoned, Naruto said as he walked past him and cautiously approached the first checkpoint. These corpses look fresh, mutilated but fresh. Miller was right, of course. The bodies, covered in leather armor, all looked freshly killed. Some were filled with bullet holes, others looked to be killed by melee. If the missing limbs were any indication, more fucking savages, said Blake. Naruto looked to Velma, who looked to be tinkering with the vault control panel. We can only assume, it doesn't matter. Whatever did this to these men will soon be ash. The group watched as Velma hooked her Pip-Boy up to the control panel. She smiled and quickly unplugged herself from the panel. They all listened as the door sirens began to buzz. Yellow lights began to flash and they could hear metal grinding metal. They watched as the vault key moved from the rafters and began to drill into the center of the vault door. Eventually the drilling stopped and the cog-shaped door began to roll left, revealing the insides of the vault. They were about to enter when Miller shouted, "Stop! Look at your helmet display. This vault has traces of radiation." Naruto looked at his helmet's HUD and, true to Miller's word, his Geiger counter was flicking upwards. Blake chuckled and rolled his shoulders. What of it? These suits will give us protection from the radiation. Catelyn sighed and looked at Velma. And what of Velma? She isn't in power armor. Velma smiled before digging through her satchel at her side. Not to worry, I have this. She proudly pulled out a gas mask and began to strap it onto her face. Is that gonna keep you safe? The radiation levels are pretty high. She smiled through her foggy mask and held her thumb up. It should be fine for a short while. Plus, if any of us get irradiated, we have rataways ready to go. Naruto smiled at the perky girl and her attitude. Okay, now that that's sorted, let's go in. All form up around Velma. She will guide us to the filtration system. In last, the gang started to descend into the vault. They moved cautiously through the metal hallways of the vault, with Catelyn in the front looking around bewildered and pointing her rifle in front of her. "Why haven't we seen anyone?" Blake on the back looked over his shoulder and said, "Surely the vault dwellers would have come over by now. Perhaps they are preparing an ambush." Naruto on Velma's right shook his head and said, "No, look at the lights, they are red. Vaults only do that when they go into lockdown. If you look closely, you will see scratches from blood and scorch." "To be honest, Blake, I have no idea," Naruto said, looking at the deformed bodies and gaggling in his helm. "To be honest, Blake, I have no idea. By the looks of things, radiation must have gotten into the vault, mutation must have happened to these poor souls before they died. Look at your Geiger counters, the radiation is getting heavier," he said. The group nodded in agreement with Naruto's statement. There was evidence of fighting everywhere, with piles of human meat and blood sat in many of the corridors. As they proceeded deeper into the vault, they saw windows covered in grime and blood. Velma interrupted their conversation by pointing to the end of the hallway and saying, "Okay, this is the center of the vault, through the left door should lead us to facilities." As promised, the group saw a door, and above it was a grim, soot-covered sign that read, "Facilities." Catelyn pressed the door panel on the right, and they watched it slowly open, their eyes widening at what they saw, a hulking creature that was easily 9 feet tall, its green body exposed, its only clothing being its crude hide pants, its enormous muscles dripping with perspiration, and bulging blue veins that seemed ready to burst from them. It turned to face them, and they saw its enormous square teeth snarling at them. "Human!" It roared and pushed Catelyn away before aiming its wooden rifle at her. The sounds of bullets hitting metal reverberated through the hallways as Naruto moved ahead of Velma, watching as the green beast shot at her. Catelyn shrugged off the bullets and aimed her rifle at the beast, and they all watched as its green head exploded in bone and brain matter. What the fuck was that?" screamed Blake, and Velma, breathing quickly in her mask, knelt down to examine the creature. "It looks humanoid, my guess is a mutant due to the radiation," she said, as laser fire caught their attention behind them. "There must be more of them in this fucking place, we need to find the part quickly and get the fuck out of here," Miller screamed over the laser fire as the mutants swiftly turned to ash and mutilated flesh in Blake's hellfire. Catelyn reloaded her gun and turned to Velma, asking, "Velma, do you think you can dash squelch ****?" A crude-looking sword crashed down onto Catelyn's helm, cutting through the metal and ripping the sword roughly from her head as it did so. The group watched in horror as her body slowly fell to the ground. Behind her, a green mutant with ragged, angry breathing raised its sword in the air, ready to strike down the now trembling Velma, who appeared to be a child in comparison to the beast. Velma closed her eyes in fear and waited for the blow to come. When she opened her eyes, she saw that Naruto's armored form had charged and tackled the beast. They both fell to the ground, with Naruto on top of the mutant. He roared and used his powered hands to slam the mutant's face in. She turned to see that Blake and Miller were still firing at the seemingly random mutants that were approaching. Naruto grabbed the scrap metal sword from the mutant and thrust it straight through the eye of the flailing mutant on the ground. He slowly stood up and turned to the rest of the group. Velma didn't know if she was seeing things, but from the looks of it, Naruto's eyes seemed to glow red behind his helm lenses. With a roar he ran down the hallway past Velma, past Blake and Miller and towards the 2 remaining mutants. Blake and Miller stopped their firing and watched in horror, and Naruto charged at the mutants with a crude sword in hand. Bullets pinged off his armor, some penetrating his armor gaps and digging into his flesh. He didn't stop however and swung the blade, cleaving the head off one mutant. The other jumped at him, causing them to fall to the floor. They both tussled on the floor before Naruto grabbed it by the head. Using his thumbs he pushed them into the eyes of the beast, causing it to cry out in pain. He pushed the mutant off him and straddled the now thrashing monster. He began punching it in the face. Over and over he punched until he felt someone grab his right arm. He turned ready to pounce on the person that grabbed him, but stopped when he saw it was Miller. "Sir, enough, it's fucking dead." Naruto looked back down to the mutant to see its head was no longer there. All that remained was paste and a growing pool of blood. With a huff he stood up and looked down the hall to see Velma crying over the core of Catelyn. He walked down the hall and placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. She looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. "Sir, she's dead." Naruto nodded solemnly before turning to Miller. "Miller, go into facilities and make sure no more of these fucking mutants are waiting." The man nodded before stomping off into facilities. He sighed and looked back down at Velma. "Velma, I am sorry. We will take her back with us when we go home. Everyone will know that she died defending us," he said. The girl nodded weakly before getting to her feet. Miller approached them and pointed through the door. "It's all clear, sir." Naruto nodded before turning to face Blake. "Blake, we're going in, you stay here and watch over Catelyn." Blake simply nodded before continuing to stare down the hallway. The three of them entered the facilities and searched for the part. Velma moved slowly over to the water filtration system and started searching the machine for the part. "Sir, I have found the part, it's intact," she said with a feeble smile as she took something out of the machine. "Well done, Velma, let's get going," Naruto said, nodding to her as he turned to leave, but he heard Miller come up behind him. "Sir, look," he said, turning to see that Miller was holding the part that Velma was just holding. "A spare," was all Velma said as she took the part from Miller and placed it in her satchel. She then walked back over to Catelyn's body and knelt down to get closer to her. They all stood over her and bowed their heads in silence. "Did we get the part?" "Good, I would have hated all of this to have been for nothing," said Blake, as Naruto nodded and turned to face him. "We got 2 of them," he said. "Catelyn died a hero, and I will make sure the whole vault knows of her sacrifice. She will be remembered." They all nodded and said, "She will be remembered," at the same time.